welcome back to episode 13 of When Life Feels Messy. I am one of your wonderful hosts, Erin Raspberry.
Hello, everyone. I am your other wonderful host, Ashley Barrera.
And this episode signifies the first of the second year of content for When Life Feels Messy. Whoop, whoop.
I know, that is so gnarly, dude. Like, I'm so proud of us.
I know, we are doing it. We are doing the thing.
We are doing the thing.
Yes.
Yay.
And August is actually also National Wellness Month, which kind of perfectly ties into the topic for this episode, which our lovely Ash has kind of spearheaded and chose. And I think you're in for a real treat. But anything you want to say about it being National Wellness Month for our listeners?
Yeah, so it's kind of like general term when you first hear it, like National Wellness Month. Like, what does that mean? Wellness.
Yeah.
So specifically with mental health and, your overall emotional, mental well-being is to prioritize self-care and healthy routines and habits so that your overall well-being, how you're functioning, how you feel, those thoughts, those inner dialogues are what you are choosing and what you want to make them and how you can care for yourself. And, maybe even reflect on that backlog of stress or, sadness or anxiety and take care of that too. So that's why I'm really excited about this month.
Yeah. And I think it's important too to say, like, of course, like we talk about mental health because that's our field, that's our niche area. But like wellness in general is not just about mental health. Like it's your physical, it's your spiritual, it's your emotional and social. Like, so there are a lot of elements to it. So when we say wellness month and taking care of yourself, it's nourishing the multiple cups and roles that you have in life. That's a preview of what's to come.
Oh, loving that.
Did you like my foreshadowing and my creepy whisper?
Yes, and it's a great transition. Yes. So as you may have read of the title to this wonderful episode, Finding the Balance You Deserve, a guide, maybe a brief guide, for non-traditional students. And I really wanted to tie this to August, not just for National Wellness Month, but to kind of highlight the diversity that we as mental health providers see in our students on campus, and not just the students we work with, but what the students that make up all three campuses together.
Yeah.
Because we are such a diverse and inclusive university. So I'm like, why haven't we touched on this before? Why haven't I heard more about what a quote unquote non-traditional student is? And I know like Erin and I, we're based on the Houston campus. So that's kind of like the students that we see every day. So today we're going to be talking about what specifically a non-traditional student is. And it's not just about the label of non-traditional student. It could be a student with many roles and responsibilities outside of school, outside of the classroom.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Sorry. I think that's a good point of, I think for me, when I hear non-traditional, it's almost a stereotype of it's like an older person in their 40s, 50s, like going to school for the first time, like they have kids, right? And it's like, no, there's a lot more encompassing to that. There are students that are in their 20s that identify as a non-traditional. And so even just like challenging my own, like thinking about that is really important and eye-opening to see like there's a lot more to this than is even like talked about here.
Yeah, for sure. And so I want to highlight, I kind of did that we have students coming from all walks of life, not just straight out of high school into college. So the label non-traditional student is what we'll be using throughout this podcast today, but it's not like a set in stone label or definition. It's ever evolving.
Right.
And like you said, it's kind of stereotypical, like non-traditional student. Um, and when I was researching and looking more into this, I actually found some statistics from the National Center for Education Statistics. That was a long title. That 73% of students enrolled in higher education in the United States fit the non-traditional student definition, which is kind of mind-boggling because
Yeah.
that's like more than half.
Yeah.
And
That's a big
so,
percentage.
yeah, 73%. So I'm like, so is non-traditional, quote unquote, becoming the new traditional, the new,
Right.
like, this is the norm?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, it just makes me think of like the term traditional, like
Yeah.
might be outdated. Like,
It is
like
outdated and it's more it when I was reading about this, it really gave me the vibes of like patriarchy of like this is what a student's
Mhm.
supposed to look like, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Male, white, like coming from a
Mhm.
wealthy family that could afford at
Right.
a college. So I'm like, okay, we're getting to a new place in society and in time of like this is not what our students look like, especially not here at TWU.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I think maybe new verbiage needs to be created here. Who wants to
Yeah,
spearhead that? Let
I
us know
know.
your thoughts. What should we call students?
I know. So, but for the sake of this podcast, we're just going to stick with non-traditional
Hmm.
to simplify things. So, for non-traditional students, the college experience is very different and challenging as they are wearing many hats and dealing with a variety of tasks and responsibilities outside of the high demands of school and all the
Hmm.
things that that encompasses.
Yeah, yeah. And, I think even to give more specifics on what a non-traditional student can look like or include, because
Mm-hmm.
like we said, like there kind of was this like stereotypical idea of what non-traditional includes, and it's definitely far beyond that, right? But
Yeah.
what we have found, like in the research, is that non-traditional students are students who are over the age of 24. And I'm like thinking right now, like, that's most of my clientele,
Same. Yeah.
right? Then especially at Houston, we have like a lot of grad programs, like
Yeah.
that's where ours are. And I feel like 24 is kind of like the minimum age of
Like,
like people that I see. So that's
yes.
interesting to hear. Also people who hold a full-time job, which I'm again like all of my clientele pretty much
Yep.
because Houston's expensive and
Oh,
people have
yeah.
like a lot of people have to work to be able to afford paying for tuition and living here in Houston. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Also people that received a GED or some other kind of certificate instead of like the traditional high school diploma. And I'm gonna put that in air quotes because this traditional thing, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. People who live off campus, which that is Houston and Dallas,
Exactly.
100%. We do not have dorms. We have apartments that are really close, and I kind of consider that like are on campus, but
Right.
we have a lot of students that drive in from all over the Houston area. Um,
Exactly.
Being a single parent, again, like this is something that I think we see pretty commonly, right? Especially like it being grad programs and things, people are like holding many hats here with
Mm-hmm.
that. Taking a gap year. So I think a big thing that kind of became popular, maybe even within the last decade or so, was this idea of taking a break after high school or even
Mm-hmm.
undergrad before going into the next thing. And a lot of that looks like going abroad or just spending time working and getting experience or finding, yourself and what you want to do.
Yeah.
Um, Students who are enrolled part-time in college, which now I feel like is a lot. Like I feel like is a majority of students because
Yes.
things are just so expensive. If you have or care for dependents, if you like, this can include children, if you take care of elderly people like in your family, or maybe family members with a disability, people who are financially independent from their parents, right? So if their parents don't fund the tuition or costs to live or buy food or whatever, right? Like they're financially like having to rely on them working, financial aid, whatever, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
afford that. And also people who have served in the military. So I don't know about you listeners, but even going through this list, I'm like, I literally did not have even like remotely an idea, like when I hear non-traditional, right? Because it actually includes so many of the people that I encounter on the daily. So that was really interesting to read through.
Yes. So, like I mentioned earlier, this list of defining things that create a non-traditional student or define a non-traditional student is ever evolving. And one that I forgot to include, which just popped up while I was listening to you, is international students.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes, they are
Because
definitely considered non-traditional.
they are, and they are like held to different requirements just to become and stay a student here in
Mhm.
the States. So let's not forget them.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm glad you added that.
So how do these factors impact academic success and the general well-being of a student in higher education? So the obvious,
Mm.
right? Significant increase in stress levels all across the board
Mhm.
as more tasks and responsibilities fill your plate.
Yeah.
Not, I know grad school is very like rigorous and demanding, but undergrad can be the same if
Yeah.
you're like wanting to speed up the process and get all your basics out of the way, or you're
Mhm.
trying to be involved in student organizations, or like you're still figuring out what college is like and how you feel, and trying to take your time. It could be overwhelming on
Yeah.
top of who you are and what you have to do outside of the classroom, meaning maybe I have to go take care of my parent. Maybe I have to, go pick up one of my siblings or go drop off my child somewhere, or like
Mhm.
go to work and make sure I'm on time and also
Yeah.
address my stress, right?
Yeah, yeah. I can't tell you how many like times for like students that, I've worked with that tell me I don't get a single day off between school and work because if I'm not in class, I have to work to get hours to get money to pay for my apartment or to live. And it's just like,
Yep.
then we wonder why there's so much stress and burnout and overwhelming feelings. And it's like,
Yeah.
here you go. Red flag right here of what's
Yeah.
going
So, like you mentioned, the time, energy, attention, and prioritizing all the things can become overwhelming
on.
and increase loneliness and helplessness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because usually, typically, I know in my clinical experience, my clients that I've worked with that can be labeled as non-traditional, they are probably one of the first family members, or they don't have any role models that have gone through this exact same path that they have. And so
Right.
they're like figuring it out on their
Mm-hmm.
own.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of those, what is it like when you're on a hike and you're like forging your own path, or like, discovering something that no one else has done before? It could feel
Yeah.
like that, and like you're alone and you don't know
Mm-hmm.
what to do.
Right. Yeah.
So that could definitely increase feelings of inadequacy compared to other quote unquote traditional students who may have the time to study that extra hour, or who may have their parents, financially supporting them, or may have that support system or that social group to go and vent to,
Mm-hmm.
um, and may have that extra just attention or energy to quote unquote really understand the course material
Mm,
versus a non-traditional student may feel like, okay, I have to remember this and do this and do this, and their endless to-do list
right.
is just never done.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know if you've experienced that too.
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like I hear all the time the comparing game like come
Yep.
up and be like, well, I don't process information as quickly as my younger like peers, or like it
Mhm.
takes me longer to like retain information, and then that makes me feel like, am I gonna be as good or as like almost like marketable in the
Yep.
career world? And it's like this whole idea of comparing yourself to younger people, right? Or people who have less priorities, responsibilities, and roles isn't fair
Hmm.
to the person that does have those things, because you're not at all in the same life path. Like, yeah, you're pursuing the same career and you're in the same program, but that's like comparing an apple to a potato.
Yep.
Like, you're not even in the same like group of
Mm-mm.
like how you like grow and the things you've gone through and your experiences. And so it's, I really try to encourage, like, when students are feeling like that, of like, this is doing you a disservice to almost like view yourself as less than for someone who hasn't even walked a life similar to you, you know?
Exactly. Yes.
But it is something that comes up a lot.
Yeah. And in that note, it's also from my experience, I'm noticing that continuous compromising
Mm,
or sacrificing of things, or especially time
yeah,
spent with loved ones or yourself, with yourself, or studying, or things that you would want to do. Like, hey, I really want to stay after school and, knock out this assignment or study for this exam coming up, but I can't because maybe I have to go do these external things that don't even relate to my academic success.
right,
Like, I got to go make money so I could feed my baby,
right.
or,
Yeah.
you know, and that is a lot of pressure
Mm-hmm.
to enter into college with, of like, okay, how am I going to get all these things done?
Right, right. Yeah.
Something that is really like kind of like pushes my buttons a little bit is this next one of the course structure and deadlines leave little to no flexibility for
Yeah.
non-traditional students who may have an unexpected work or family emergency.
Yeah.
I know, like, I've heard numerous of stories of syllabuses are set in stone, right? Of like,
Mhm.
hey, I know this seems really unfair.
Yeah.
And also, this is how it's set.
Yeah.
And there are those circumstances of like, I'm going to have to miss this class or this quiz because my tire blew out, or
Right.
no one else can go help my family member,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
or someone called into work and I have to go pick up this shift,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
Other key impact here is the financial stress.
Yeah.
Typically, non-traditional students receive a Pell Grant or some type of financial assistance. Um, and like we mentioned earlier, work full-time jobs or work part-time. And
Mm-hmm.
that is constantly in their back of their mind, like, how am I going to pay for X, Y, and Z? How am I going to make sure I have enough food to go this week, or to make sure that my family's okay?
Yep.
So
Yep.
with less resources or time, as we've talked about, the path to burnout just accelerates.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And burnout is a real thing. And it's really important that we kind of use this negative, quote unquote, negative experience of burnout or how it got there as an opportunity to practice managing burnout for when we're in our field or when we're like done with college outside in our work. And I try to like bring that up to clients of like, okay, this really sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And also let's use this as an opportunity to practice how you are going to choose to manage it and deal with it and take care of it
Right.
versus letting your feelings drive the bus on that.
Right, yeah, like what is in my control that
Mm-hmm.
I can change or do
Mm-hmm.
versus just almost like, well, I can't change this, so like I'm just gonna have to like whatever, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So, yeah.
Yeah. So I know we just touched on a handful of these major factors that impact students' well-being, and I know there's probably more that we didn't touch on, but I want to make sure that we spend at least half or a little bit extra time on ways of how to find that balance and what
Mm-hmm.
that could look like.
Yes. Well, I think too, like it for our listeners that are, hearing this, like I hope that so far it's been almost like an affirmation of like, yeah, like that's what I'm going through or that's how it feels. And I hope this, next part is like, okay, cool, this is something that I can apply, right? And try to
Mhm.
use. Because I think too, like a big part of like what comes up is almost just this feeling of I have to just like keep grinding and grinding and grinding. And then like anything that has to do with taking care of yourself gets thrown on the back burner, which we talked about before. That's usually like one of the first things to go, right?
Mhm.
So looking at like how can we like specifically find a balance in our life, right? And what that can look like and feel like. I think one of the most important things is to really figure out like who is your support system, right? Like who
Mhm.
all that includes. And I worked somewhere and I can't remember now which place it was, but almost like having like who's your cheerleader squad, right? Like
Yeah.
who's in your corner, who's sitting in the bleachers
Yeah.
cheering you on, right? And so like
Yes.
really figuring out and identifying who those people are in your life and reaching out to them, right? Like
Yeah.
saying whether, you have like an agreement with them of like, hey, like this has been a really stressful time for me as I'm in
Mhm.
school, right? And I might have moments where I need just some affirmations or a little extra care, or I need to get out of the house and out of my head, right? Like
Yeah.
making sure like your support system too, like knows like what you're experiencing and going through so that when those feelings of loneliness or you having to do with it by yourself come up, you can challenge that and remember like no, I do have my support people that have like affirmed and agreed to be there for me, right, and show up in my life,
Mhm.
and I need to lean into that a little bit.
Yes. And on this one, like particularly, I want to highlight that our support system and the people that make it our support system, it could look like people that you might not think are part of your support system. Maybe it's like
Mhm.
your barista that you see every Saturday,
Yeah.
or, your coworker that y'all both experience the same, hard times at work and y'all can go and vent together. Or it could look like, reaching out to a professor after a test or for help on an assignment. It could look like these people that you wouldn't really consider like, oh, I would open up and like be super duper vulnerable with. And let me like put them into like this close friendship circle. But it's all of these different people that we interact with
Yeah.
that support us in some type of way to help with that burnout.
Yeah. Oh, I like that you said that because I think too, a lot of the time people can be like, oh, well, I don't really have like family like members that are supportive, or I don't really have like friends. And then it's like, so I guess I don't have a support system. And it's like, no, like who are the people in your life? It doesn't have to be these like stereotypical roles, right, of family or
Exactly.
friends. Like, who are the people? So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Um, Next thing is really spending time reflecting like what is like the financial situation that you're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's something where like, hey, for the next 3 years, money's gonna be tight,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or like maybe I can't do trips, like, or celebrate like big birthdays with friends or etc. for the next
Right.
so many years or whatever, right? Like really figuring out like what exactly is your financial situation, so you're aware, you have like an idea of what we're working with. And then
Yes.
think about like what are some strategies to make and save money, right? Like, do you need all those like subscriptions and those
Yeah.
streaming apps, right? Like
Yeah.
everyone's sharing with someone. Like, where can we like, I'll give you this if you give me that kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? Like creating a budget for everything in your life, right? Not just the necessities,
Mm.
right? But in knowing like, hey, like if this is something where I know like this thing that I get, maybe even brings me a little bit of joy, right? And is a
Yeah.
necessity in the sense of like helping me feel like some calmness or whatever it may
Yeah.
be, like include that in your budget,
Mm-hmm.
right? And also thinking of like preparing for, are there times of the year where we're not able to work as much? Big example is when field work comes into play, and
Yes.
then you go from being able to work a couple days a week or weekends, and then all of a sudden it's, I might have to move out of state for a whole semester to do this field work, right?
Exactly.
So really
Yes.
thinking about and preparing for that. Or, maybe even like picking up extra shifts during school breaks if that's manageable and doable and allows you to kind of like have some financial security that
Mhm.
will hopefully bring less stress for you later on down the road.
Yes. I know when I was in grad school, I became okay with and let my family and loved ones know. Y'all getting Five Below Christmas presents and birthday presents. Y'all getting a $5 Five Below gift.
Oh my God, I love Five Below.
I know, me too. And so, making those types of strategies and like
Mm-hmm.
making or talking to myself like this is okay. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is where you're at and how can we help ourselves in making those plans?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Next thing that we can do to help us find balance is really prioritizing self-care. And we say this, how many times have we said this? This needs to be our business.
100 billion times.
Any guesses? Someone put in the comments. What are your guesses on that? But we have to every day, every week, we have to be intentional and prioritize self-care. I don't know how many times that you need Ash and I to say this and in different ways for it to be like, yes, right? But we have to also like figure out what does that look like for us, right?
Mhm.
Because what looks like self-care for me does not look like self-care for Ash. Well,
Exactly.
maybe a couple things like kitty cuddles and shopping. But
Yes.
but what does that look like for you? What do you need as like things in your self-care routine that allow you to just give back to yourself, right? And feel
Yes.
this sense of like, I'm able to fill my cup up in this way, right?
That was literally popping up in my brain.
Really?
We're
Wow.
connected.
We are connected, soul sisters. Wow.
Wow.
But this could also too include family time, right? And some of
Oh,
you might feel like family time is not self-care. Like my
yeah.
family's stressing me out. That does not make me feel good.
Hmm.
Awesome. Then you know a smidge part of your self-care and what feels good for you. But some
Exactly.
of you out there are like, I feel rejuvenated when I get to see my family and spend time.
Hmm.
Great. Let's include that.
Right.
So we also want to be able to reach out and communicate when and how we need help, right? Whether it be in school, right? Like studying and like connecting with the Pioneer Center, or I know I've heard a lot of like peer groups and the programs where they
Yes.
like schedule certain days to study, whether it be like family wise, if we're like to our partner, like, hey, I have 2 exams on Saturday and I'm not going to be able to clean the house as much for our child's birthday party that night.
Right.
Like I need you to kind of come in a little
Yes,
bit and
exactly.
being able to communicate that. And also like work tasks too, right? Like
Yeah.
being able to say like, hey, like I might need assistance here, and
Mm-hmm.
being okay with communicating that and not, I'm gonna say this because I hear this come up a lot, not feel like you are dumping or feel like you're a burden to other people. It could be a whole other podcast episode.
Ooh, yes, let's let that sit.
Just insert music here.
Uh,
um Next thing is really be realistic about what we're adding or subtracting from our plate of responsibilities, right? So what if I go through this list of what I've taken on, what is something like positive or maybe even like necessary that I've added, right?
right.
And what might I've taken on because maybe I didn't want to tell someone no,
Or I
or
want
maybe,
validation.
or I want validation, or I felt obligated, but it doesn't actually bring like positivity and productivity in my life right now. Like, what does that look like? And I want us to be really intentional about practicing that curiosity and that patience and really understanding what we are able and not able to accomplish right now and what might need to just be put on the back burner for a couple years or a couple months or whatever it may be, right?
Right. Yes.
We don't have to do every single thing right now. We need to
Mm-hmm.
find out what is manageable and doable given how many roles that we have in this
Yes.
current phase of life.
I know this is really connected and shared with women that we work with because we just want to take on all the things.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's how society and cultural standards like place value in women. But
Yeah.
when we're really honest with ourselves and not just honest, but kind as to the things that we can and can accomplish, it's
Mm-hmm.
like a breath of fresh air. It's like we don't have to carry all this weight on our shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, something I find helpful is really asking yourself, whose voice is it in my head that's telling me I should have to do all these things?
Ooh,
And
yes.
is it your authentic voice? Is it society's voice? Is
Mm-hmm.
it a parent's voice? Whose voice is that actually? And if it's not yours, why are we listening to it?
Ooh, great advice.
Drop my baby mic.
Literally.
Oh man. And last one to wrap up this section here is maybe part of our self-care needs to be that we really take the time to celebrate and reward ourselves for everything that we are doing and all the hard work and energy and time we are spending on school or being a parent or working or being a child of a parent or
Yeah.
whatever these roles are. Why aren't we including more time just being appreciative of what we're doing?
Ooh, yes. And this is reminding me of a video of Snoop Dogg
Love Snoop.
when he's like, I'm going to clap and celebrate myself for just showing up and
Yeah.
being me and walking in my shoes every day because no one else is going to do it. And when
Yes.
I do it, I show up and I choose the way I want to do it. And I'm like, oh,
Oh,
you
Snoop Dogg
hit
with
my
the
heartstrings.
wisdom.
Yes, he dropped his
God.
mic.
Yes. I feel like that's a good like point though, because like when I think about it, like I don't think I've ever seen anything Snoop has done where he didn't show up as himself. Like even my most favorite videos on like National Geographic,
Oh,
when
yes.
he does the narration for the animal videos. Like he is authentically him. He is not trying to sound like whatever, what is it, a zoologist. He's not
Mm-mm.
trying to sound like he knows what the heck these animals' names are because he gets them all wrong.
Yeah.
But he's just himself, and it's so authentic and genuine and literally makes me laugh so hard. I will link it so you all can enjoy it. Um, but I just, yeah, like how like impactful would it be to just like celebrate us for showing up as ourselves? No matter if we conquer a huge mountain goal or a little pebble of a stone, right? Like a pebble's a pebble, right? Like anything that is done where we put in our energy and time and effort deserves to be appreciated.
Facts.
Back.
Another baby mic drop.
Another baby mic drop. Oh man, this one's
Ugh, yeah.
look at Santa.
So I know. So Erin, you just shared like some great ways of finding a balance, and we didn't touch all of them. But the great thing is that we could discover on our own time what those things of finding a balance look like for you
Yeah.
specifically and genuinely.
Okay, all you wonderful listeners, we are at the stage where we wrap up this episode. And as always, I say always, how many did we miss where we didn't give a quote? But we are giving a quote, and not just one, but dose quotes for this
Oh,
episode
yeah.
because Ash and I couldn't agree on one.
I think we agreed on a lot and we narrowed it down to two. So
Yes.
we're doing good.
Right. And we are appreciating that we agreed to two
Yes.
small victories in the world. So I think the first one is the one you chose. So I'm going to let you read it in your awesome voice.
Okay, thank you so much. But I will need help on pronouncing the person's name, last name, because I don't know how to pronounce that.
You don't know who she is?
I do, but I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
I think I do, so we might butcher it, but carry on.
Okay. So the quote that I really gravitated towards was my number one choice is, when you have balance in your life, work becomes an entirely different experience. There is a passion that moves you to a new level of fulfillment and gratitude. And that's when you do your best for yourself and for others.
Mm-hmm.
By
And it's by Cara Delevingne.
Cara Delevingne. I was gonna say something else, like Delevingne.
Delevingne.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's Delevingne, but I
Okay.
think people would know who we're talking about.
Yeah, I know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I just love that quote. Yes.
Yeah, no, I do. I like that one as well. I'm glad you picked that one. Okay, so this next one is by Robin Gobbin, which love that name. And it says self-care is fundamentally about bringing balance back to a life that has grown imbalanced from too many commitments or responsibilities. And I think that really ties back to what we were talking about in really analyzing the responsibilities and roles that we've taken on and where have we taken on too many, right? And almost like lost an essence, right, of what we want to do and what we can manage, and really reflect on I have to be able to provide myself with what I need in order to be able to have this balance and say, you know what, maybe this responsibility or this role isn't serving me right now, right? And you know, where necessary and applicable, maybe I need to put that to the side for now.
Yeah. I really love that quote. That was my second quote, my number two, but self-care,
Yeah,
fundamental.
we talk about it all the time. And you know, hopefully listeners, like, you understand the necessity of it, and if not, like, stay tuned, we'll talk about it again.
Yep. So on the note of staying tuned, next month's episode 14, will be about Sexual Health Awareness Month.
Yes.
Yes.
Gonna be spicy.
Spicy, informative, I'm excited because, I know that we're in a society that's more or getting more comfortable with the topic of sexual health and sexual awareness, but it can feel still like uncomfortable or taboo to talk about
Yeah.
in conversation. So we gonna be touching on that.
Yeah, we ain't gonna leave no stone unturned here. We gonna get into the nitty-gritty of it.
Get into that.
So fair warning. Viewer discretion. Is that what it's called? Is it?
Yeah.
But with that, thank you so much, listeners, for tuning into another episode. I hope that this episode was just like affirming for you. If you
Yes.
identify, even if you identify as a quote unquote traditional student, right? Like, I hope that this was affirming for you of just the importance of really reflecting on what you need,
Exactly.
right? And being able to say, like, what's in my control and what can I remove or add to my life that feels good for me.
Yes.
And remembering, like, to fill your own cups. Because, like Snoop said, no one else is going to do it for you.
Boom. I think that's a great way to do so.
Peace.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you for listening. Wonderful, wonderful listeners.
Yes. And we will see you next month. Bye.
Bye.